Well, hello everyone, Texie88 here and welcome to another review. And now after having reviewed the ZX Spectrum version of CodeMasters Professional Skateboard Simulator, or Pro Skateboard Simulator for short, now I'm taking a look at the Amstrad CPC version. And as you probably noticed, anyone who's seen my Spectrum review will notice that sprite looks familiar, albeit with the colour added. So, as you probably guessed, this is bound to be a Spectrum port. So, and I know Mark Rivers was also responsible for this, which further sort of convinced me that this is a Specky port. And the controls seem to be exactly the same as for the Spectrum version, the usual ZX, OK and P. But one thing I have noticed is that, as is quite often the case with the Specky ports, it's slower, which is not ideal because get back up there. Oh God, no, come on. Oh, you scum, if only I hadn't crashed just then. I'm a bit, but the thing is, I've just noticed that the clock in the bottom middle of the screen keeps strict time. So the fact that this runs slower than the Spectrum version is actually causing problems already. Oh God, get on with it. Again, why am I falling in puddles? Yeah, I don't know if that... And even this is a Spectrum port. I mean, look, it's monochrome. And it's still got the same floaty control issue as the Spectrum version as well. Oh, come off it, I bet. I don't think I even touched that. Oh, for God's sake. Ugh. Come on, get on with it. Oh, for God's sake, the controls. Oh, come off it. That is so frustrating. Oh, God. The slower speed makes it even harder to control this thing. Why is the momentum so horrendously high? That just makes it more frustrating than was necessary. Now, from what I'd heard, the Darling brothers that were the brainchild of CodeMasters for the most part seem to be doing a case of doing the Amstrad version first, and then the Spectrum version being a port of that. But I wonder whether this is actually this might actually be a case of being a Spectrum port to the Amstrad, simply because it runs so much slower. Well, not so much slower, but it is slower, and that's usually the main problem with... Oh, for God's sake, I can't get used to these horrible floaty controls. And again, I'm on a I've got a keyboard. Why do I have to do this arcade style keying in of name? Okay. Let's give this another whirl. And it is a shame and it is a shame that this version Oh, it's a shame this version doesn't have the visible kicking animation that's in the Spectrum version. I don't know. Maybe this was another case of the Spectrum version being based on this rather than the usual case of it being the other way around. I'm not absolutely sure, but if that's the case, why does this run noticeably slower? That's usually the case when it's when the Amstrad CPC version's a Spectrum port. Oh, come off it! Ugh. And you have to go through those flags. If you miss even one, you can't go. Oh god, the controls aren't quite as responsive as in the Spectrum version either. They're a little bit stiff, in fact. Ugh. Come on, get on with it. I mean, I still wouldn't say it was terrible, but it's not as playable as the Spectrum version. It's slower, which makes the time limit tighter. Oh, come off it. I didn't even touch that. Ooh, just made it. Oh, God. Hate that bit. Oh, the controls are so floaty in this. Until you've played this, you have no idea how floaty they are. Ooh, just. Oh, God, that's a very tight time limit. If I'd made one mistake, I probably wouldn't have done it. Oh, for God's sake, look at this, with these floaty controls. Come on, get on with it. Oh, God. I don't like these floaty controls. Oh, there was a finish line on the right there. Oh, for God's sake, these floaty controls. Oh, for goodness sake. Oh, God alive. It takes too... What? Well, what's the point in having that bloody finish line there if you have to go the other way? That is a tease. And poor design. Oh, God. Oh, so I actually have to go that way. Oh, get over. Oh, oh, God. I can't be... Oh, I can't be bothered with that anymore. Oh. So that's Pro Skateboard Simulator for the Amstrad CPC. I'm sorry, but out of this version and the Spectrum version, I definitely preferred the latter. This one's noticeably slower, and the clock still keeps strict time, so it actually puts more pressure on you not to make too many mistakes. And the controls aren't as responsive as they are in the Spectrum version, even though the actual control system itself is identical. I'm really glad they didn't do like they did with 720 degrees, where the CPC version had a completely different control method that just didn't work. Luckily, they kept the same control system that works so well in the Spectrum version. Graphics. well, they don't really make the best use of the CPC's capabilities. Yes, that bottom bit's is unique to this version, and yeah, yes, they've added colour to the actual on-screen proceedings, in particular the skateboarder himself, but it's still got smacks of Spectrum port. And the fact that it runs slower is also quite often a staple of Spectrum portitis when it comes to the Amstrad CPC. And sometimes even the Commodore 64, whenever that's the case. And it also doesn't have the kicking animation that's in the Spectrum version either. That's just nowhere to be seen. So regardless of which way the skateboarder's facing, he's got the same static pose throughout, even when you're mashing the boost button to build up his speed. Sound, precious minimum. There's no in-game music. I mean, I know there wasn't any in-game music in the Spectrum version I reviewed, but that was the 48K version. I did mention in that there was a 128K version that does have in-game music and also has music on this title screen. And also the title screen in both Spectrum versions is animated, whereas as it had the CodeMasters logo scrolling up and down, this is static. Maybe because the Amstrad can struggle with scrolling, but the scrolling in the game itself wasn't noticeably jerky from what I could make out. But it can be a bit of a problematic area, judging by all the Amstrad games that I've seen, which quite often have to make certain sacrifices to keep speed up and not have really jerky scrolling. It probably helps that the only moving character is the skateboard in this, which probably helped with keeping scrolling problems to a minimum. But it is a shame that there's no in-game music, and the sound effects are pretty sparse, just like they were in the 48K Spectrum version, which I reviewed previously. Gameplay. Well, the fact that it's noticeably slower, coupled with the clock being in strict time throughout, despite this slight drop in pace, it does cause problems because it means that there's far more onus on the player not to make too many mistakes. And when it comes to the overhead cross-country bits, the reduced speed also means that the skateboarder is even more of a problem to control than in the Spectrum version. Because in that version, because it ran faster, although it was still a bit floaty, it wasn't as floaty as is the case here, which makes it unnecessarily difficult. And there are those problems with bad level design. You may remember there was a bit where I only knew to turn left on that first cross country bit because I'd seen footage of YouTuber 8-Bit Rach, who's also reviewed this version that we're looking at here, and she ended up going right at that point, crashed into a bunch of trees, because otherwise I would have had the same problem there. Even though I knew I went left, it shouldn't be a case of trial and error like that. And it like I mentioned, it does put the simulator thing into a bit of doubt, because you wouldn't suddenly not be able to see trees in front of you like that until you're practically on top of them. The way is the problem here. So simulator, no. And certainly nothing pro about it either. The only bit that's accurate about the title is the skateboard bit. You certainly can't deny that there's a skateboard in it. Yeah. And the controls aren't quite as responsive in general, even on the 3D isometric bits. That also puts additional unnecessary and unwarranted pressure on the player. So I'm going to be giving Pro Skateboard Simulator for the Amstrad CPC 5 out of 10. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Catch you on another one soon. Taxi88 out.